Greetings to all, and welcome to the Jamaica Diaspora Show. My name is Mark Millward of the West Indian Social Club of Hartford, and I'm your host. The Jamaica Diaspora Show is aimed at providing viewers with coverage of diaspora news and activities in a variety of areas, including business, arts, health, education, entertainment, politics, immigration, trade, and investment. Our first show featured an exclusive interview with the Most Honorable Andrew P. Holness, Prime Minister of Jamaica, who talked about the Economic Growth Council and harnessing the power of the diaspora. Tune in for more coverage in the future on the activities of the Economic Growth Council and diaspora engagement. Hartford, Connecticut is the third largest population of Jamaicans in the United States, behind Miami and New York. We intend to provide our viewing audience with global diaspora perspectives and coverage from the US, UK, Canada, Jamaica, and of course the Caribbean. Please join us weekly, Saturdays at 2 p.m. and Sundays at 3 p.m. on Hartford Public Access Television, providing global television network coverage at www.hpatv.org. Greetings. Welcome to the Jamaica Diaspora Show. My name is Mark Millward, and today my guest is Professor Neville Ying, who is the Executive Director of the Jamaica Diaspora Institute. Welcome, Professor Ying.
Thank you very much, Mark.
Well, I'm pleased to sit with you and talk. We're here on location, ladies and gentlemen, at the University of the West Indies, which is the location of the Jamaica Diaspora Institute. Professor Ying, for the viewers, please tell us what is the Jamaica Diaspora Institute?
Well, first of all, let me tell you the genesis of it. The genesis of it was that we decided we would have a diaspora symposium in 2003, and that led to a diaspora conference. And one of the recommendations from that conference is that we should have a Jamaica Diaspora Foundation and an operational arm of that foundation called the Jamaica Diaspora Institute. So that's the relationship between the two things. And the purpose of both entities is to assist the government to have a more structured engagement with the diaspora wherever they are in the world.
Okay. So when you say assist the government, what branch of, is there a specific branch?
We work most closely with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, because diaspora affairs falls under that ministry.
Okay. And so what aspects in the establishment of the Jamaica Diaspora Institute are the functional aspects? You made reference to conferences. What other functional aspects of the Institute?
Okay, let's take some broad areas. The first one is research. The other one is special projects. I can give you examples of those as we go along. And the third would be conferences. So I started conferences because that contributed to the genesis of the two bodies. Other structures were set up, of course, like the Diaspora Advisory Board, coming from recommendations out of the conference. You had the establishment of a Joint Select Committee of the Houses of Parliament as another structure that came out of the conferences.
Okay.
So all I was saying is that structures like the Jamaica Diaspora Foundation and its operating arm, which is the Jamaica Diaspora Institute, came out of conference recommendations.
Okay.
But in terms of what we do, we can just classify those three broad areas: research, special projects, and conferences.
Okay. You made reference to the Jamaica Diaspora Advisory Board. Can you tell us what that is?
That's a board of members in the diaspora that are appointed by the minister with responsibility for diaspora affairs. And those members come basically from the three major diaspora locations. So you have the USA, that would have a Diaspora Advisory Board member for the Northeast, and that's Hartford,
Right. Yes,
New York,
familiar.
New Jersey, and those areas, which have, by the way, our largest cluster of diaspora members are from the Northeast USA. Then you would have advisory member for the South, which would cover areas like Florida, you know, Texas, Georgia, and then you have the West to Midwest. So there are 3 sets of diaspora advisory board members, and their job is to advise the minister.
In what areas do they advise?
Well, the areas are really capsuled under any issues that affect the diaspora or anything that the diaspora would like to get advice on or to be facilitated with. In other words, give feedback as to what is happening out there.
So their interface is communication with the diaspora back to the government.
Right.
So they meet with the government on a periodic basis, or
They have typically 2 meetings per year. And sometimes they have meetings in between, mostly by teleconference.
Okay.
But they have like 2 physical meetings where the advisory board members come in. But again, the diaspora advisory board members are also very active people in different things. So they will come here for different missions and then meet with the minister.
Okay.
So for instance,
And this is the Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade.
Okay.
So for instance, there's a crime intervention and prevention task force. So when they come down, they will use the opportunity to meet the minister.
Right.
When they came last year on their fact-finding mission, for an example,
Okay.
like that. Somebody's coming on a health mission, they would use the opportunity to interact with the minister. One member came down just last week, dealing with immigration and deportation.
Okay. That was our Ms. Joan Pinnock from.
That's
the,
Joan Pinnock from
okay.
so she would be the advisory board member from the Northeast.
Okay.
Whereas Wayne Golin would be the advisory board member down in Florida.
Okay.
The UK has the same thing.
Okay.
You'll have advisory board members for different sections of the UK.
And
And then Canada,
Okay.
same thing.
Okay. So now, this process was established when the Jamaica Diaspora Institute was established, or how soon after the Jamaica Diaspora Institute was established?
Well, let's give you a little of the historical background
Okay.
and to tell you why it's actually located here.
Okay.
The Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade called us, and me in particular, because I was working with the School of Business and actually became the director when Professor Gordon Shirley went off to be Jamaica's ambassador to the US, and says, how can the school assist with this diaspora engagement? So out of that came the symposium which we had, followed by the conference. So that is how the genesis of it really worked. And then later on, based on the recommendations out of the conference, the institute and the foundation were established.
Okay. And along with that, the advisory board members. Now, so the foundation is basically the Jamaica, as you explained, is essentially the
board.
Support. Yeah, the board that supports all
Right.
your facilities.
Right.
Okay.
So you're asking about the key functional areas.
Right.
So I started with research.
Right.
So I'll give you some examples. First of all, we had as a special project a project funded by the EU, and out of that we were able to develop something very important, which is a diaspora website for the institute, which is called JamaicaDiasporaConnect.com, which is a very important tool in terms of the communication process with the diaspora. But under that project as well, we did an extensive study of about 8 to 9 other diaspora countries, just to get an idea of just how they organize their engagement process, what sort of government structures they put in place, and just how they use different entities to facilitate engagement and facilitation of the diaspora, or form partnerships with the diaspora. So that's a very important piece of research.
Yes, I think so.
The other piece of research we got into was just to do some baseline study on the size of the diaspora. So we came up with numbers that I can tell you now that our current estimate is 3 million. And that, you know, the large part of that 3 million is the USA, and which is 1.7, and 300,000 in Canada, and 800,000 in the UK, and 200,000 in other parts of the world. So that was a very important piece of information. The other piece of research is what we call a situation analysis. And that has to do with when the government is now developing two policies. One is the International Migration and Development Policy, and the section of it which is the National Diaspora Policy. So that situation analysis now helps to inform different sections of that those policy documents.
Okay. Now, what can you talk about some of the accomplishments of the Jamaica Diaspora Institute?
Well, some of them are wrapped up in what I just answered. One of them was
the
establishment of the website for communication, the research which informed the size and geographical distribution of the diaspora. We spoke about that, and in fact...
I'm talking about in terms of, I guess I should have been more specific on accomplishments. In terms of when you have your conferences, and we're bringing in people from the U.S., UK, Canada, they're making recommendations. Has any of those recommendations been embraced that led to some results in terms of that type of
Okay, let me answer it in this way. The Institute plays a very integral role in terms of helping to shape the conference agenda. That's our input into the process, in terms of its content and its schedule and its structure. We also assist in pulling together the recommendations from the conference into a report. And then now the ministry would take that and engage different ministries and departments and agencies to act on the recommendations. So all we do in that case is facilitate that process. So for instance, out of one conference or forum, so it's not only conferences like the ones we have in Jamaica, we also work with the diaspora in forums that they have in the locations. So for instance, when there was a health forum in Minnesota, we helped to facilitate that. When there was a health forum in Toronto, we helped to facilitate that. And out of those fora and the big conferences we have every 2 years would come different recommendations. So we have specific things like the diaspora would decide, okay, there's a great need from their interaction with communities for blood pressure machines. So they would go out and they would, first of all, they set themselves a target of 1,000 blood pressure machines. And to date, they have, you know, gathered and sent to different clinics in Jamaica 430. So it's a very specific output. The Education Task Force say they would run a special summer workshop for primary school children, looking at some learning issues and also some health issues. They went ahead and they actually got funding, support from the USAID, so they ran that workshop. And so they assisted in that area. So you have very specific things like that that come out. There was another case where a student athlete died. And the diaspora realized that if the schools had defibrillators, they would be able to use them, you know, with athletes to do the first check. And so members from the diaspora, in particular out of the Northeast, did, especially during the 2015 conference, brought down some defibrillators and actually conducted a session with some selected schools and got that process going. And later on, they gave some more. So I'm just tying down this quick. The US Education Task Force just launched a pledge for building last year, which was another of their commitments. So they have a $2 million drive to assist the Ministry of Education with the infrastructure development for basic schools and primary schools. So I'm just giving you some very specific things like that. Out of the conference too comes certain concerns. So for instance, the diaspora might say, okay, how can you facilitate when we bring down things to donate.
Mhm.
So the government went ahead and set up this new Charities Act. Now to facilitate that Charities Act, and to facilitate people getting like duty-free clearance at custom, 2 ministries have set up some facilitating bodies as a result of that. So the Ministry of Health has set up the Health and Wellness Foundation,
Mhm.
and the Ministry of Education has set up what is called the National Education Trust. So anybody from the diaspora donating to health or education would go through those 2 entities.
Mm.
Because once it goes through them, it's legitimate, it goes to where they want it to go, and it gets you through the whole hassle of
Mm.
customs clearance. In addition to that, being in the Ministry of Health, they can interface with the Medical Council and the Nursing Council, so that if a doctor comes down and he needs to be accredited, they can liaise with the Medical Council, and so for the nurses. So it's areas like that that came out of conference and fora discussions that now come to reality. The only requirement they have, though, is that they encourage the diaspora to convert their organizations to organizations with charity status.
Mhm.
So you have, like in the US, your C401,
Mhm.
Sorry?
Yeah. Mhm.
and so they encourage work, because it's better when a charitable organization from the diaspora donates to the charity in the Ministry of Health and the charity in the Ministry of
Right.
Education. It makes everything
Right.
go smoothly.
That's 501 C.
Right.
Right. Now, you made specific reference to the Jamaica Diaspora Task Force, also the Jamaica Diaspora Crime and Prevention, and
Which is another thing that we
Right.
facilitate.
Those are significant accomplishments.
Believe me, because last year I got a call from one of the advisory board members in the Midwest West,
Mhm.
that he's putting together a group of Jamaicans with expertise in a variety of areas to assist the country with the whole area of crime intervention and prevention.
Mhm.
And so they have pulled together a very impressive team,
Mhm.
and we assisted them in their fact-finding mission last year when they came.
Mhm.
So they spoke with government ministries, they spoke with private sector, they spoke with non-government organizations,
Mhm.
and out of that, we assisted them to develop a report, which we condensed down to probably 3 or 4 areas that they're going to support. So out of that has come now a specific thing, like they want to assist with what is called a Safer City Initiative.
Mhm.
Something that was tried in the US, like in cities like Los Angeles, that had reduction of crime of about 45%. So they specifically are pulling a team together now to work with the Ministry of National Security, with the Jamaica Constabulary Force, and with the JDF, the Army, to see how they can pull that together. The beauty about that program is that it's very multifaceted.
Mhm.
It involves the church, it involves sports, it involves education, the schools, it involves mentorship programs, it involves conflict resolution. So it's a very nice program that integrates everything. So that's one of the areas that we are working with them on. So in fact, they're going to come down back in July to speak about how they can partner with different issues. The other area of need here that was identified by the Ministry of Justice was the caseload in the courts. And so they have gone back to say they're going to put a team together to see how they can assist that ministry and the courts with reducing the loads there. So those are some very specific deliverables.
Yes, those are. But now let me. I want to talk more about that, but I need to take a break, and when I come back, I want to talk more about that and identify the other task force.
Yes, we speak a little about education and I come back.
Right. Okay.
And health and all that.
Right. Okay. So we'll be right back with Professor Neville Ying. We're on location. The Jamaica Diaspora Show is on location at the University of the West Indies. We'll be right back. And we're back with Professor Neville Ying on the Jamaica Diaspora Show. We're on location at the University of West Indies in Kingston, Jamaica. Professor Ying, before the break, we were talking about the Jamaica Diaspora Crime and Prevention Task Force, and those were the comments that you made were relative to the activities of that task force. I did want to mention that the Crime and Prevention Task Force is actually on a visit to the United Kingdom.
I know, because that's again the kind of facilitation we do. So the leader of that team would call me. I would get in touch through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs with the High Commissioner there and try to facilitate in that way. So, you know, that's how the ministry and us work in close collaboration.
Okay. And I just wanted to identify some of the other Jamaica Diaspora Task Force. There's the Agricultural Task Force.
The Agricultural Task Force actually led by two persons. You have Neil Curtis, that's doing one section, which is Farm Up Jamaica, which in particular they're interested in ginger and ginger oil and turmeric. So that project is going. There's Kimon Gooden, who is what we call a future leader member on the advisory board.
Okay.
That's another area that they improved on as they set up the advisory board, which is to have the younger people be members of the advisory board.
Now there's a technology task force. Can you tell me something about what that task force is doing?
Well, that task force, as I understand it right now, is actually part of the crime intervention and prevention.
Technology?
Yes, because remember now that you have the intelligence and cybercrime aspects, and a large part of that, you know, is going to be based on things like geoinformatics and stuff like that. So that's how the ICT fits into it. In addition to that, some parts of the ICT will feed into the school program, which is part of the Safer City program. So, you know, the Safer City initiative is going to really integrate a lot of pieces. We even have somebody who is a black belt. That's going to be part of that, and he's out of Florida.
When you say black belt?
Karate.
Okay.
But, you know, those disciplines, you know, activities like that help to build discipline among the youth when they're involved in activities like that, which is part of a crime prevention, you know, strategy. So that initiative alone is bringing together a number of pieces, you know, so then you have the Education Task Force. And one of the drivers behind it is actually Leo Gilling, who interestingly was in the West and then has moved now to Florida. But he's continuing to work still, and he was really behind the $2 million, you know, fundraising drive.
And how is that? How has it been?
That's going okay. They have to probably lengthen their time frame. They assume they could have collected everything by December, but you know.
So where are they right now, as far as what they've been able to do?
I've had any recent feedback from them. I'll have to find out just how far they reach. But the interesting thing is that they have linked up with two very important partners. One is the Coalition of Alumni Associations in New York, because that association of alumni is actually has charity status, which is what I mentioned before, which makes it easier. They have linked up with Jamaica National Foundation, which has this website for I Support Jamaica, because, you know, part of what we're doing is part of the crowdfunding kind of technique of raising funds. So it's important to have those partners in place in order to make that effective. Health has been very, very active over the years. I mean, you know, you have nearly 200 health missions that come each year, 200. And they go all across Jamaica. So their work has been a very continuous and very impactful work, because they go to very rural communities and offer a variety of healthcare services, dental services, optometry, everything like that. And that's a very big support system out there.
I had another question on the national diaspora policy and the migration. There was a migration policy. Can you explain what those two entities are?
Okay. Now, remember that we start from a position that Jamaica is both a sending country and a receiving country. So that's why I need an international migration and development policy. Because we're not talking about only people who leave here, we're talking about people who are coming here. And you know, in the Caribbean you also have the whole thing about the free movement of labor in terms of the CARICOM agreement. But apart from that, you have investors coming in, especially in the area of tourism. And so we have to be accommodating their managers and their workers And you have people just coming here, some are coming to teach, some are coming to work in the health sector. So the international migration and development policy is geared towards both the sending and receiving aspect. Now, under that umbrella are different things. So they deal like with governance and legislative issues related to that. They'll deal like reintegration of families, because, you know, people from the diaspora, like the return residents, are coming back home. Reintegration of involuntary returnees, otherwise called deportees. So you have to deal with issues like that. But they also deal with remittances and diaspora and development. So the international migration and development policy is really the umbrella policy. What we have done is taken out the section that largely deals with diaspora and development and areas like remittances now, and have a special policy. So the government is now developing a new policy to deal with just diaspora.
So is the Institute is also involved in that
Oh
process?
yes, as I said before, all the situational analysis work and the research on different diaspora locations and different diaspora countries will help to inform that policy. Because some of the things you look for, you know, are good practices or best practices elsewhere, to see how you can learn from that in order to shape your own policy. So for instance, one of the big areas, or the first major area in the policy, deals with diaspora engagement. So how does a country like Ireland or Israel or India or the Philippines or Mexico, you know, deal with engagement? We want to learn from them, because you have to have different modes of communication, you have to have different structures, you have to use information, communication technologies, social media, all kinds of things like that. You have to have face-to-face things. You have to have all kinds of different ways of communicating. Then now, the intention is to broaden the concentration on the three major locations right now, which is the USA, Canada, and the US. And say, you know, we have diaspora members who live all over the world. So now we have to pay more attention to like the Northern Caribbean.
Can you talk about when those in the diaspora, particularly those that are interested in investing in Jamaican business?
One aspect of the policy deals with that.
Well, I mean, can you talk about some of the contacts that you've had to entertain, or that you've had to facilitate their inquiries? Because I know that my understanding is that people in the diaspora, when they have interests in investments, or if they have an interest in coming into Jamaica to establish some business entity, they go through you, and in turn you help them facilitate their interests. Can you talk about any of that?
Yeah, we sort of act like as a clearinghouse in some cases, because you really have government agencies that deal with that. So you have like JAMPRO, that's really, their job is investments.
Right.
But we also work closely with the Jamaica Stock Exchange, because they also are working in the diaspora and seeking equity investment. And one very interesting aspect of their work is the junior stock market, because that deals with smaller size businesses, which is a lot more, you know, small, medium-sized businesses. And they also deal with large businesses, don't get me wrong, but the thing is, they find it easier when they are attracting investment from the diaspora to work through those. So we try to work closely with them and point persons that, you know, make inquiries to us to those two entities. Okay. So we perform that kind of facilitative role, you know. Okay. Or somebody might come down and says, well, I'm interested in Medicandra.
Yes, I know of that situation.
So I would say, okay, let me link you up with the researchers in the university.
And that's very important.
Yes, and let me link you up with some people here who are investors or potential investors in that area. So you simply put them together, they take it from there.
Right. Now, youth, that's...
Right, well, let me speak about youth. What I find is that to interestedly or engage the youth in the diaspora, you have to have specific projects in which they are involved. So the Institute went ahead and designed what is called a Diaspora Youth Connect project. And that project we had to work with a lot of partners. So first of all, we partnered with CUSA International because they had the capacity and funding to provide us with volunteers from the diaspora. Then they also were able to get us assistance from USAID. They also put us on to an outfit in Washington called the Young America's Business Trust, who develop business development workshops for youth. Those volunteers, when they come here now, would assist us to work we work currently in 8 inner city communities right now. 6 in Kingston, St. Andrew, and 2 out in St. James. And interestingly, those communities are volatile communities, some of them. We focus on the business development aspect, but that is a way in which we engage the diaspora with, and especially the young section of the diaspora, with young people here. So that's one project. The next project is actually done by Grace Kennedy, which is a company, and it's called the Birthright Program. So they try to attract like university students, those who are in their 2nd, 3rd, or final year, or just recent graduates, who are diaspora members. They bring them down for about 6 weeks during summer, put them through their different business operations, but also give them some cultural immersion. Then recently, a young group out of the UK called Jamaicans Inspired, they have decided to link up with the Jamaica Cultural Development Commission, because they have what is called a festival queen show each year. Each parish has a queen, and each parish queen has a project. So what the young people in the UK have done is to start to do fundraising to assist the parish queens in different parishes with their projects. And so far they have given assistance to St. Thomas, Hanover, Manchester, and they've started in St. Elizabeth. So when the show comes on again this summer, they'll intensify that. They've actually signed a memorandum of understanding with the Jamaica Cultural Development Commission to do that. So I'll just give you examples of 3 things. So that's how you involve the young people. You have to have specific projects. The UK is also thinking about their young people of having what they call parish ambassadors, where they would probably send out a young person there to work in like St. Thomas. As I call St. Thomas all the time, because I have great interest in there, and also Hanover, because sometimes they are the underserved parishes. So they would come down and spend some time and assist. So in a nutshell, what we try to do is to have specific things in which you can engage them.
Okay. This is my very last question, and it relates to the fact that, and it's about crime and prevention, and because people have identified that there's a segment of the population, youth, that are a significant contributor in that area. So with respect to comments regarding the establishment of the Jamaica Diaspora Crime and Prevention Task Force, some of those comments have been, how can a diaspora group outside the country, overseas, provide solutions to this problem, and they're overseas. How do you respond when people are making those kinds of comments? That
I respond in this way, that just like how they work in the health sector or education, diaspora members have done a fantastic job in terms of actually coming down and spending time and sharing their expertise. And they do that very, very well. So what I envisage is going to happen in the Crime Intervention and Prevention Task Force, just like how Joan and her team came down last week, or Wade Golden will bring down a team. I expect Captain Francis is going to bring down a team and work. So they're going to actually spend some time here and give their service. What we're encouraging them to do is to do like what we did with the Diaspora Youth Connect project that the Jamaica Diaspora Institute runs, which is to partner with persons who are already working in communities. So for instance, I work through different partners. So like in Augustown, which is near to the university, and Mona Commons, I work through the University Township project. Because the university has what is called the Mona Social Services. They are actually in the community working. So once I link with them, It takes the burden off because they actually work with people there. But the university also have several other support arms. They support the Peace Management Initiative. They have a social work section that works in the communities. You know, the university have various arms that work. So once I work with them, so what I'm encouraging, like the Crime Intervention and Prevention Task Force, is to work with entities like those. Not coincidentally, but interestingly, we're only one of the projects in there. But because there are several other groups like that working together. Communities like Augustown and Mountain View, in which we work, had 0 murders last year. So that's why I'm encouraging the task force when they come to link up with communities like that that have a structure out there with partners already working, which will take the burden off them because they'll only come down for a short time. Those people carry on the work. And all they will do now is probably share best practices, lend some expertise and all that. So you have your eyes and ears and knowledge on the ground here which you can benefit from.
Okay, thank you. Well, Professor Ying, thank you very, very much. I think that the work that the Jamaica Diaspora Institute is doing is fantastic. What you don't know is that a significant reason for establishing the Jamaica Diaspora was to communicate in large part what the Jamaica Diaspora Institute was doing.
Okay, I know that.
So it was a void that
yes, because you know we're working so hard, we don't tell people what we're doing. So
yes,
we're happy that you are going to provide that opportunity.
We're trying, and I want to compliment you on all the work that you've done, and
all my partners that
and your partners,
both here and in the diaspora,
and the work that we're going to be doing in the future.
Right.
Do you have a moment to talk about the Jamaica Diaspora Conference coming up?
Well, I'll leave that to when you meet with the folks
Okay.
tomorrow. But
Okay.
essentially what I can tell you is that it's July 23rd to 26th. On the 27th, they'll have the usual day of service. The diaspora usually go to the communities and do a fantastic job in supporting the communities. So that will still be there. The theme this year is Partnering for Growth. So there'll be a great accent on partnerships.
Okay.
And that's why I was emphasizing that in my comments all over.
Okay.
Business partnerships, partnerships for philanthropy, stuff like that. Partnership for sharing of expertise.
Okay.
So we're building the conference around what I call three clusters. The investment cluster, the philanthropy cluster, and the expertise cluster.
Okay.
And when you come to the meeting tomorrow, you'll hear some more about it.
Okay. Well, okay, thank you very much, Professor Ying. Always a pleasure to speak to you.
Pleasure as well.
And, ladies and gentlemen, that's it for the Jamaica Diaspora Show. We'll be back next week with more coverage of interesting things that are going on in the diaspora as well as in Jamaica. Thank you for joining us. We'll be back next week.